Today we've got the post-Trump conviction best case scenario for Joe Biden in the upcoming presidential election. I'm also going to do the best case scenario for Trump, but that might come out in a couple of days. So as always, this is the best reasonable case scenario. It's not going to be Trump completely collapses and loses 45 states. But in this scenario, Biden is going to have a better than average night. Now I am going to say this month, I'm not going to do a normal Biden-Trump prediction. Given the verdict just came out, it's way too difficult to make a serious prediction. So I'm going to give it the rest of the month to see how things settle and see what kind of polling comes out. I would expect the immediate polling to be a little bit more favorable for Biden. We'll have to see if that sticks. So let's dive into this map. We're going to start by filling out the safe states for Biden. And these are expected to be over a 10-point margin and not in play. Now, as with all my predictions, a lot of these ratings are going to be borderline, either lean likely or likely safe. Your rating might be different even though we're only off by about a point. So again, this is very preliminary, but I don't think there's any question we can give Biden Hawaii. Also, the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, very safe for Biden. Now, before we get to the East Coast, we've got to stop off in Colorado and New Mexico. Both these states, Biden did win by double digits back in 20. So if he has a great night, I would expect he would at least be able to match his 2020 totals. So that means these are both going to go safe. Next, we're going to go to Illinois, and that is, of course, going to stay safe. Now we could head to the East Coast. Let's start at the top in Maine. Last time at large, this was about 9 points. In this, I'm going to assume Biden does even a little bit better, and it's going to get up to safe. The first district is going to be extremely safe for Biden. Now next door in New Hampshire, last time Biden won this by more than 7, and that was a big shift from 2016. So on a great night for Biden, I'm going to assume a lot of those moderates, the higher educated and suburban voters, they're going to be a little bit more turned off by Trump here, and that's going to cause Biden to do a few points better. Now I think it's debatable whether it would be likely or safe. You could put it at likely if you want to go high single digits. I'm going to say this just barely gets to about 10.2% and goes safe for Biden. Then of course we've got Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. Nothing to say about those states. And the last state we're going to give to Biden by a safe margin is going to be Virginia. He cleared it by 10 last time. We'll say the D.C. suburbs come out hard for Biden. That keeps it into double digits, and it's going to go safe. Now the safe states for Trump, a lot of these are going to be the same. We're going to go with Idaho, Utah, Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, Nebraska at large. Nebraska's 1st and 3rd congressional districts. The first would get a little bit more narrow, but still stay over 10. Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, and West Virginia. Some of these states could get a little bit more narrow, like Kansas or South Carolina, but ultimately I think it would be a little bit more unreasonable if they got down under 10. Now the likely states for Biden, these are going to be between a 5 and a 10-point margin. And again, these are all going to be highly debatable, but we're going to start in Arizona. Last time we know Biden famously won the state by a very narrow margin. It's not friendly to the Trump brand, especially in Maricopa County and those suburbs. I know the polling has shown Trump doing pretty well here, but I'm going to say a conviction here is going to be a little bit more potent, and that's going to bump this up to just about 5.25 for Biden. Now we can go northeast and head into Minnesota. This is another one that is borderline likely safe. We all remember it was a narrow win for Clinton back in 16, then it swung a lot toward Biden in 20. In this, I'm going to assume Biden's great night puts this just under 10 points and stays likely. One other spot we could go likely for Biden is going to be Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. It's suburban, and Trump is not the best fit for this district. And the last likely state for Biden is going to be Pennsylvania. Now all these Rust Belt states I have at close to a 5-point margin. Like some of these other states, I'm going to say Pennsylvania just barely gets over 5. In this scenario, the Philadelphia suburbs don't really come back to Trump much. His turnout might be a little bit more suppressed in the rural counties, and that's going to be enough to have this go likely. Now the likely states for Trump, I've only got one of them, and it's going to be Alaska. They've got ranked choice voting. The state has gotten less red over the past decade, so if Biden has a great night, I'm going to assume that Trump still wins it by under 10 points. Now we've got the lean states. These are under a 5-point margin, but more than 1 point. For Biden, he's going to get Nevada. And of course, the polling has shown Biden trailing. At a normal environment, I expect that polling to even out by election day, but in this blue wave type of scenario, we're going to say the conviction gives Biden a bounce. It's just under 5 points, probably about 4.5. Now we could go back into the Rust Belt and go into Wisconsin. This one is also right at about 4.5 to 5 points. It's kind of the same story as the other states. Biden's going to get a bounce, and it's not entirely unreasonable that it could hit over 5, but for right now, it's going to stay at leans. It's going to be the same thing next door in Michigan, about another 4.5 to 5-point win here for Biden. The last state for Biden, he's going to get Georgia. He narrowly won it last time. The polling so far has shown it pretty good for Trump, but in this scenario, the Atlanta suburbs are not going to go for the conviction. It's going to keep it blue by at least a few points and go leans for for Biden. Now we've got the lean states for Trump. Let's start in Texas. It's going to be a similar story with the suburbs. They've already moved toward Biden in the past. This would accelerate that trend a little bit. And even if Trump makes gains in a place like South Texas, it is going to make the margin much more narrow. But I don't think it would quite get close to flipping. I still think it would go to Trump by about 2 to 3 points. Then we can hop over to Trump's home state of Florida. This is another one that theoretically I think would get more competitive during this type of scenario. I think it would be a little bit better than Texas. Not exactly close to flipping, but not exactly likely. I'm going to say about 4 to 5 points. Now we have to bounce up to Iowa. You could argue there's no way this would get down to leans, but I think a 4 to 5 point win for Trump here is reasonable in a blue wave type of scenario. It's going to be the same thing in Ohio. It just gets down under likely, not close to tilt, but of course in a best case scenario for Biden, he's just going to do better and it's going to get a little bit more narrow. And finally, back in the northeast corner, we've got Maine's 2nd congressional district. This is Trump-friendly territory, so I expect him to win it regardless. But in a post-conviction best case scenario for Biden, the assumption is the enthusiasm is depressed for his supporters. A few of them might even defect to a third party, but Trump is still going to get it by a lean margin. The last state is North Carolina. This was close back in 2020. Biden would love to flip it in a normal type of environment. Polling has been solid here for Trump, but in a great night for Biden, I think it would be only fair to give him a bounce, and that is going to flip the state. It's not going to be substantial, but he is going to get it by a tilt margin. So that's it. The final total comes out to 319 for Biden, 219 for Trump. So Biden gets this by 100 electoral votes. And as always, there's going to be some differences of opinion in the comments. That's fine. But this is how I think it would go if Biden had a great night. This map can also be updated in the future as time goes on, but this is preliminary because we really don't know what the fallout is going to be from the conviction. But I think in the short term, it's reasonable to think that Trump would have somewhat of a setback. Independents, moderates, suburban voters, maybe even a small percentage of Trump supporters would be a little bit turned off by the conviction. So basically almost everywhere moves a little bit toward Biden in this scenario. It's going to be a little bit more dramatic in places that were never a big fan of Trump to begin with. But I do think the damage would be worse if Biden were actually popular. He's got his own liabilities and he's already been trailing in the polls. Now this scenario assumes that some of that turns around, but it's also going to be unreasonable to think that Biden is extremely popular by election day. If that were the case, then I'd have to make some more changes to this map. But I'm also not going to go in the extreme other direction and start flipping a bunch of other states. I don't think Kansas or Mississippi would get under 10. I don't think Texas would flip, but a lot of the other margins are debatable. But again, keep in mind, a lot of these are borderline likely safe or lean likely. So I'm not going to go on about this forever. This is the best case scenario for Joe Biden as of June and after the Trump conviction. Let's give it a few weeks and see what actually happens. We'll also take a look at the best case scenario for Trump coming up probably in a couple of days. But for now, let me know in the comments, what do you think about this scenario? Do you think this is reasonable? Do you think it's too friendly to Biden? Do you think it's too friendly to Trump? Which states would you change? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.